What would you do, if the very son you raised with love and sacrifice kicked you out of his home, believing you had nothing, while unaware you'd quietly saved $10 million over a lifetime? When successful Atlanta lawyer Marcus Bennett coldly told his 61-year-old adoptive father, "I need my space, you need to figure out somewhere else to stay," he had no idea the ripple effect this choice would unleash, and how soon, everything he thought he knew about power, respect, and family would be turned upside down. Stay tuned to witness this powerful, emotional story of pride, humility, and redemption, one that will surprise you at every turn. Dear viewer, if you are watching my story for the first time, I humbly request you write the location from where you are watching right now, subscribe this channel and press the bell icon now not to miss the notifications of my daily published new stories. Thank you, and let's dive into the full story. It was a cold, drizzly Tuesday when Elijah Bennett knocked on the glossy oak door of the sprawling two-story house in the heart of Atlanta's Buckhead district. The polished brick driveway gleamed from the recent rain, and the scent of freshly cut grass mingled with the damp air. Elijah, 61, stood tall and lean, his short salt and pepper beard framing a face of wisdom and quiet strength. He wore a worn brown leather jacket over a crisp shirt, dark trousers, and polished shoes that hinted at his old-school attention to detail. The house wasn't his. It belonged to his adopted son, Marcus Bennett, a 40-year-old corporate lawyer climbing fast up the ladder at one of the city's elite firms. Elijah had adopted Marcus when the boy was only 10. Abandoned by his birth parents, Marcus had been a wiry, bright-eyed child with an insatiable hunger to prove himself. Elijah had provided him a stable home, guided him through school, encouraged him at college, and celebrated when Marcus landed his first high-paying job. Now, Marcus has barely called. And when he did, there was an edge to his tone, something dismissive, as though Elijah had outlived his usefulness. Elijah wasn't one to chase after anyone for affection, but circumstances had forced his hand. His rental apartment was under renovation due to structural issues, and the landlord had insisted that all tenants vacate for a few months. Not wanting to impose on friends, Elijah had called Marcus and asked if he could stay in the guest room for a short while. Marcus had agreed, albeit reluctantly. As the door finally opened, Marcus appeared in a tailored navy suit, expensive watch gleaming on his wrist, phone in one hand, impatience in his sharp brown eyes. His tone was clipped. "You're early, Dad. I've got a call in 10 minutes. Elijah simply nodded, lifting a modest suitcase. "Won't be in your way. Just need a place to rest my head for a bit." Inside, the house was tastefully modern, with cold gray walls, marble counters, and sleek furniture. Everything screamed wealth and prestige, but little warmth. Marcus led Elijah upstairs to a small, sparsely furnished guest room. "That's it," Marcus said. "Keep your things here. And if you could avoid being in the living room during the day, that'd be great. Clients sometimes come by." Elijah's eyes flicked across the room, taking in the expensive but impersonal decor. He set down his suitcase. "Understood. I'll keep to myself." Days passed with little interaction. Elijah rose early, made his breakfast quietly, and often spent time walking the neighborhood. He observed how Marcus moved around his home, clipped, rushed, always attached to his phone, snapping at his housekeeper, Martha, a sweet older woman who seemed intimidated by her employer's curt commands. One morning, as Elijah was pouring coffee, he overheard Marcus speaking loudly in the adjacent office. "I can't believe I'm stuck with him here," Marcus said. "The man has no retirement plan, no investments. Just leeching off me now that he's old." The word struck Elijah like a blow to the chest. He sipped his coffee slowly, the bitterness matching his mood. Little did Marcus know, Elijah had worked in the construction business for decades, quietly saving and investing with discipline. Over the years, he had amassed nearly $10 million in savings and assets. It had never been about showing off or keeping up with anyone. He'd chosen a modest lifestyle, believing money should provide freedom, not status. Marcus didn't know because Elijah had never told him. Partly out of humility. Partly because the distance between them had grown. Now, hearing himself spoken of as a burden was a hard truth to swallow. The tension escalated. That evening, while Elijah was reading in the guest room, Marcus knocked brusquely. "Dad, we need to talk," he said, stepping in without waiting for permission. "Look, this arrangement isn't working. I've got too much going on here. It's awkward having you around. You need to figure out somewhere else to stay." Elijah closed his book, looked up calmly. "You gave your word I could stay till my place is ready." Marcus shrugged. "Well, things change. I'll give you 2 days. After that, I need my space." A flicker of disappointment crossed Elijah's face. "I see." Marcus left without further discussion, returning to his world of high-powered clients and fancy dinners. Alone, Elijah sat in the dim light, thinking. He had never asked Marcus for money. Never leaned on him for support. And now, he was being pushed out of the home he had helped his son achieve through years of sacrifice and encouragement. But what Marcus didn't realize was that this wasn't the end of the story. Elijah had options. And soon enough, the truth would unfold. As dawn crept over the horizon, Elijah made a quiet decision. He would leave the house on his own terms, but when he did, Marcus would learn exactly who he had dismissed so carelessly. The wheels of change had begun to turn. 2 days passed with a heavy, oppressive air inside Marcus's house. Elijah remained polite and composed, carrying on as though unaffected by Marcus's cold dismissal. He packed his suitcase slowly, methodically, making no scene. But inside, his heart weighed heavy, not with grief, but with a rising sense of clarity. On the morning of the second day, Elijah took his usual walk down Peachtree Street, the city's financial heart. The summer sun gleamed off the tall glass towers, men and women in sharp suits hurried past, phones glued to their ears. Elijah moved among them unnoticed, a quiet observer in a world of flash and ego. He stopped by a familiar building, Jenkins and Wells Financial. The firm had been handling his investments for 20 years. Steady, reliable returns had turned his modest earnings into a fortune. Inside, the office manager, a cheerful black woman named Carmen, greeted him warmly. "Mr. Bennett. Always a pleasure. How are you today?" "Well enough, Carmen," Elijah replied, offering a small smile. "Could I have a word with Charles?" "Of course. He's free now. Go on back." Charles Lanning, a 50-something financial advisor with silver hair and a sharp mind, rose from his desk as Elijah entered. "Elijah. Always good to see you. What brings you in?" Elijah took a seat. "I've been thinking about some changes, Charles. Moving some assets. I might be looking for a new property. Quiet, out of the city." Charles leaned forward. "Certainly. You know your portfolio's more than healthy for that. I can have listings sent your way. Any particular price range?" Elijah's eyes twinkled faintly. "Let's say, under $5 million for now." Charles laughed. "That'll buy you just about anything you want in this market. I'll get my team on it." They spoke a while longer about options, liquid assets, and next steps. When Elijah finally stood to leave, Charles placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "You've built quite a legacy, Elijah. Quietly, smartly. I admire that. Just say the word, and we'll make it work for you." Elijah nodded. "I appreciate that, Charles. You'll be hearing from me soon." By the time he returned to Marcus's house that afternoon, the housekeeper, Martha, met him at the door, a nervous look on her face. "Mr. Bennett. Marcus said to tell you, he's arranged a car service to take you wherever you want to go. Tonight." Elijah arched an eyebrow. "I see." Inside, he found Marcus pacing the kitchen, phone pressed to his ear. His voice was sharp and dismissive. "No, I don't care what the client thinks, Linda. Get it done by Friday or find someone who will." He clicked off the call, noticed Elijah standing in the doorway. "Oh. You're back. Listen, Martha told you. I've got a car service coming. Should be here around 7. Elijah studied his son silently for a moment. Didn't have to arrange all that. I can manage myself. Marcus shrugged. Just want to make sure you're taken care of. No offense, Dad, but my life's too busy for all this right now. I've got deals closing, big clients in town. You understand? Elijah gave a small nod. I understand. What Marcus didn't understand was that Elijah had already secured a short-term luxury apartment on the north side of town, paid in full through one of his many untouched accounts. He wouldn't need a car service or a handout. As evening fell, Elijah packed the last of his belongings, took one final look around the cold, elegant home he had once imagined would be a place of family pride. There was nothing left for him here now, not warmth, not gratitude. Just polished marble floors and empty gestures. The black car Marcus had ordered pulled up outside. Without a word, Elijah declined the driver's assistance, placed his suitcase in the trunk himself, and settled into the back seat. Marcus didn't even bother to see him off. The ride through Atlanta's glittering streets was quiet. Elijah looked out the window at the city he knew so well, the rhythms of its neighborhoods, the lives that pulsed behind each storefront and home. Soon, the car pulled into the private entrance of a high-rise apartment complex in Midtown. The doorman greeted Elijah respectfully, helping him with his bags. Inside his new temporary home, a sleek two-bedroom apartment on the 20th floor, Elijah stood at the window, gazing out over the city lights. His phone buzzed. A message from Charles, found some promising listings. Sending details your way. Elijah typed back. Good. I'm ready. He turned off the phone and sipped a glass of cool water. No anger filled him. No bitterness. Just certainty. Marcus had made his choice. And soon enough, choices carried consequences. Tomorrow, he would begin looking in earnest, for a new home, for new opportunities, for a future free of false respect. And somewhere along the way, the truth of his quiet fortune would rise to the surface. When it did, Marcus would finally understand just how wrong he had been. Elijah smiled faintly to himself. The game was only beginning. The morning sun cast long beams through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Elijah's new Midtown apartment. The space was a far cry from the cramped guest room at Marcus's house. The tasteful furnishings were understated yet luxurious, mahogany and leather, soft rugs underfoot, a subtle scent of lavender from the fresh arrangements the concierge had placed. Elijah brewed himself a pot of strong coffee, the aroma filling the quiet space. His phone buzzed again, another message from Charles at Jenkins and Wells, several properties are ready for viewing. Would you like to tour this afternoon? Elijah replied simply, yes. See you at noon. Meanwhile, across town at the towering offices of Hardin and Rowe LLP, Marcus was in the thick of it. The sleek modern conference rooms buzzed with the chatter of high-stakes deals and legal wrangling. Marcus's name carried weight here. He was one of the firm's youngest partners, known for ruthlessness and results. But beneath the surface, whispers followed him, about the way he treated his staff, the sharp words he had for those beneath his status. During a break, one of Marcus's peers, a sharply dressed partner named Todd Whitman, leaned against the espresso bar, sipping a macchiato. He spoke casually to a junior associate. Did you hear? Marcus kicked out the old man who raised him. Just dumped him out. The associate blinked. His father? Adopted, Todd said, smirking. Still. A man practically raised him. No savings, no retirement. Real sad story. Across the firm, such whispers grew. No one dared confront Marcus to his face. But the story spread, first as gossip, then as something colder. It reached ears at the country club, in quiet corners of boardrooms. The story painted Marcus in an ugly light, a man too proud, too cold to honor the person who had made his success possible. That afternoon, Elijah met Charles and two agents at a private gated estate in the northern suburbs. Rolling lawns, towering oaks, and a 5-bedroom colonial-style home awaited. Elijah took his time inspecting every detail, his discerning eye missing nothing. One of the agents, a young black realtor named Damien, watched Elijah with growing curiosity. "You move like a man who's done this before," Damien said lightly. "Not many buyers ask about the roofline and subfloor structure." Elijah chuckled softly. "Worked construction near 40 years. You learn to notice the bones of a place." Charles added with a smile, "Elijah here is one of our most valued clients. Quiet about it, but sharp as they come." Damien's eyes widened a little. "Well, Mr. Bennett, this property would suit you fine. Plenty of privacy, fine materials, excellent condition." Elijah stood in the grand living room, gazing at the wood-paneled walls and stone hearth. "Put in an offer. Full price. No mortgage." The room fell silent for a beat. Charles merely nodded, unsurprised. Damien glanced at the paperwork with renewed respect. "Will do, sir." As they drove back into the city, Charles glanced sideways. "I take it things with Marcus have cooled." Elijah's gaze was calm. "Let's just say, I'm moving forward." In the coming days, the sale proceeded with swift efficiency. Word of Elijah's purchase rippled quietly through the circles that knew. To the surprise of a few old acquaintances, Elijah Bennett, humble, soft-spoken builder, had closed on a multi-million-dollar estate with no loans. The whispers spread. At a gala dinner 1 week later, Marcus mingled with Atlanta's elite, bankers, CEOs, and politicians. Yet more than once, he caught sidelong glances and murmured greetings that lacked their usual warmth. He noticed his longtime golf partner, Richard Palmer, avoiding eye contact. A young executive, Claire Hargrove, coolly declined his invitation for a drink. Later, near the bar, Todd approached with a thin smile. "Marcus." Heard the old man landed on his feet. Marcus stiffened. "What do you mean?" "Closed on that big place up north. All cash, no less. Must have had more saved than you thought." Marcus's stomach turned. He forced a shrug. "Must be someone else." But Todd's smile sharpened. "Oh, it's him. Elijah Bennett. Impressive. Word is, he's worth more than a few of the folks here tonight." Marcus laughed thinly and excused himself, but unease gnawed at him. How could that be? His father had always lived modestly. There was no way, was there? Back in his glass-walled office the next day, Marcus scoured online property records. Sure enough, there it was. Elijah Bennett, owner of a $4.8 million estate in Brookhaven. All cash purchase. Marcus stared at the screen, stunned. A pit opened in his stomach. He had dismissed his father as a leech, humiliated him, only to find out he'd been sitting on a fortune. And now, word was spreading. People were talking. His polished image was fraying. Marcus's phone buzzed, a calendar alert. Lunch with senior partner Rothman. He straightened his tie, pushed the troubling thoughts aside, and prepared to meet the firm's elder statesman. But deep down, the cracks had already begun. He had underestimated Elijah. And the cost of that miscalculation was only beginning to reveal itself. Marcus could feel it in the air, an almost imperceptible shift in how people treated him. The cheerful greetings from secretaries were cooler now, the casual camaraderie with partners thinner, more polite than genuine. His gut told him why, though no one spoke it aloud. The story had spread, and along with it, a subtle but growing judgment. In elite circles where appearances meant everything, Marcus's treatment of Elijah had turned from a private matter to a whispered cautionary tale. He tried to counteract it, doubling down at work, closing deals faster, appearing more generous in public. He donated publicly to a high-profile charity dinner and even took on pro bono cases for veterans groups, hoping to soften the narrative. But the unease lingered. Meanwhile, Elijah's new life unfolded with quiet dignity. The Brookhaven estate was a haven of peace and craftsmanship, a home worthy of the man who had built so much with his own two hands. One morning, as he stood in the great room reading the paper, the doorbell rang. Damien, the young realtor, had come by with some paperwork and updates. They sat over coffee in the sunroom, windows open to a soft summer breeze. "You've done something here, Mr. Bennett," Damien said, shaking his head. "I still can't believe how low-key you kept everything. Most folks with this kind of wealth would be flashing it all over town." Elijah smiled faintly. "Never saw the point in flash. Money's a tool, not a trophy." Damien nodded thoughtfully. "Well, word's out now. People are talking. Lot of respect coming your way." Elijah said nothing. He wasn't chasing respect. But he knew how word of mouth worked, especially in Atlanta's connected circles. Later that afternoon, while tending to the flower beds outside, Elijah noticed a sleek black Range Rover idling at the front gate. A familiar figure sat behind the wheel, Marcus. Elijah rose slowly, wiped his hands on a cloth, and approached as the gate buzzed open. Marcus stepped out, dressed in another sharp suit, but there was a stiffness in his movements. "Dad," Marcus began. "I thought I'd drop by." Elijah regarded him evenly. "Didn't expect you." Marcus cleared his throat, glancing awkwardly at the manicured grounds. "I heard about the place. Didn't realize you'd bought something like this." Elijah's tone remained calm. "Didn't think you much cared." An uncomfortable pause followed. Marcus shifted on his feet. "Look. I may have been a little harsh before. I didn't know your situation. Just had a lot going on." Elijah studied his son, reading the unease beneath the words. "You judged without knowing. That's the truth of it." Marcus's jaw tightened slightly. "I'm trying to say I was wrong." Elijah nodded once. "I hear you." He gestured toward the house. "Want to come in? Have a look?" Marcus hesitated. He wasn't sure if the offer was genuine or pointed. But pride kept him standing where he was. "Another time. I just wanted to say, well, you're doing well for yourself. Surprised a few people." Elijah's gaze was steady. "Wasn't trying to surprise anyone. Just living how I always planned." Marcus forced a thin smile. "Anyway. We should catch up properly sometime. Maybe dinner soon." Elijah's voice remained even. "When your schedule allows." Marcus retreated to his car, the encounter leaving him unsettled. The man he had written off as a burden now stood in quiet command of a life Marcus himself envied. Back at the firm, senior partner Rothman pulled Marcus aside after a meeting. "Marcus," he said, "some advice. The circles we move in, character matters. Not just deals and money. Think about that." It was a subtle rebuke, but Marcus heard the message loud and clear. His reputation was bruised, and the path to repair it would not be easy. Elijah, meanwhile, continued to move forward. He attended neighborhood meetings, supported local charities anonymously, and enjoyed long conversations with old friends who now viewed him with newfound respect. One such afternoon, over coffee with Charles and Carmen from the financial firm, Charles remarked, "You know, Elijah, if you wanted, you could do more than just live quietly here. You've got influence now. Folks are listening." Elijah's eyes twinkled faintly. "Not looking to make a splash. But if the right moment comes, maybe." And that moment would indeed come. Sooner than anyone expected. 2 weeks have passed since Marcus's awkward visit to Brookhaven, but the tension remains. His attempt at reconciliation had fallen flat, and Elijah's calm, unwavering presence only made Marcus feel smaller. His public image continued to erode. Invitations he once took for granted now arrived less frequently. Fellow attorneys who once courted his favor now greeted him with cool civility. In contrast, Elijah's quiet influence was on the rise. It started with small things. His reputation as a self-made man of integrity reached the ears of civic leaders. Invitations came from local business groups, nonprofits, and even the city's urban renewal board. One such invitation stood out, a request to speak at the annual Atlanta Builders and Trades Association banquet. The association honored excellence in construction and craftsmanship, and Elijah's decades-long career made him a natural choice. The event would be well attended by developers, architects, politicians, and industry leaders, many of whom moved in the same circles as Marcus. When Charles mentioned it over lunch, Elijah was thoughtful. "It's been years since I spoke in public. But, maybe it's time." Charles nodded. "You'll have an audience that matters. Let them see the man behind the story." Word of Elijah's upcoming appearance spread quickly. When Marcus overheard two associates discussing it at the firm, his gut twisted. "You going to that builders event next week?" one asked. "Of course. Everyone's going. Elijah Bennett's the keynote. That man's story, incredible." Marcus said nothing, but the embarrassment burned. His father, a man he had publicly dismissed, was now becoming a respected figure in circles Marcus valued. Determined to regain control of the narrative, Marcus arranged to attend the banquet himself. He pulled every string to get a front table seat, hoping to be seen as a supportive son. The night of the event arrived. The ballroom at the Ritz-Carlton glowed with crystal chandeliers, polished silver, and fine linen. Atlanta's movers and shakers filled the tables. Marcus arrived in an impeccable tuxedo, greeting acquaintances with practiced charm. But he couldn't ignore the sidelong glances or the murmurs that followed him. At the head table, Elijah sat with Charles, Damien, and several prominent developers. Dressed in a classic black suit, crisp white shirt and deep blue tie, Elijah exuded quiet confidence. As dinner concluded, the association's president took the stage. "Tonight, we honor a man whose contributions to this city have been built not just in concrete and steel, but in integrity and perseverance. Please welcome Mr. Elijah Bennett." Applause filled the room as Elijah stepped to the podium. His voice, deep and steady, carried across the hall. "I was never one for the spotlight," he began. "Most of my life was spent behind the scenes, on job sites, in the heat, in the cold, with calloused hands and a simple goal, to build something that would last." He spoke of hard work, of lessons learned from old masters, of fairness and pride in craftsmanship. He acknowledged the young workers in the audience, encouraging them to value the work itself more than the titles. And without bitterness, he touched briefly on recent events. "Sometimes, those closest to us may not see our worth. That's all right. Because character is not defined by others, it's built in the choices we make, day after day." The word struck home. Across the room, heads nodded. Many understood. When he finished, the applause was thunderous, rising to a standing ovation. Elijah nodded humbly and returned to his seat. From his table, Marcus watched, his heart sinking. The tide had turned completely. Elijah's reputation now far outshone his own. After the event, as guests mingled, many approached Elijah to offer congratulations. Even Mayor Carlton stopped by. "Mr. Bennett," the mayor said warmly, "we need more voices like yours in this city. Would you consider joining our advisory council on urban development?" Elijah answered thoughtfully, "If I can be of service, I'll consider it." Meanwhile, Marcus stood at the edge of the crowd, unnoticed, his usual charm ineffective. For the first time in years, he felt small, overshadowed by the very man he had dismissed. That night, back in his empty house, Marcus paced. The same marble floors that once gleamed with pride now felt cold beneath his feet. He could no longer ignore the consequences of his arrogance. Elijah had risen, without flash, without bitterness, by staying true to himself. And now, Marcus faced a choice: continue chasing hollow status, or confront his failings and seek redemption. The road ahead would not be easy. But for Marcus, it was becoming clear: his adopted father's quiet strength had built more than buildings. It had built a foundation of respect that even money couldn't buy. Days after the builder's banquet, Atlanta's professional circles were still buzzing about Elijah's speech. News articles appeared on local business blogs and in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. A photo of Elijah at the podium, captioned "Self-Made Builder Inspires City Leaders," circulated widely online. Marcus read every word. Each headline felt like a fresh blow. He couldn't escape the conversation, not in the office, not at the club, not even at networking mixers where people now approached him with guarded politeness. The firm's managing partner, a dignified man named Arthur Rothman, called Marcus into his office. The leather-bound walls and vintage law books seemed heavier than usual. "Marcus," Rothman began, fingers steepled, "you've done fine work here. But you should be aware, perception matters. Several clients have asked about the situation with your father." Marcus's throat tightened. "It's being blown out of proportion, sir." Rothman's gaze was steady. "Perhaps. But the impression stands. I suggest you find a way to address it. Repair what can be repaired." That afternoon, Marcus stared at his office window, watching the traffic wind through Midtown. He'd built his career on calculated moves, polished image, sharp instincts. But for the first time, he saw how brittle it all was, how one misjudgment, one careless dismissal, could topple what he'd spent years creating. By contrast, Elijah's reputation only strengthened. The mayor's advisory council extended a formal invitation, and after some thought, Elijah accepted. He began attending meetings on affordable housing and urban renewal, offering insights drawn from years of experience. His quiet wisdom earned respect from politicians and developers alike. One afternoon, after a council meeting, Damien caught up with Elijah. "You're becoming something of a legend around here," the young realtor said. "Folks look at you differently now. You ever think about going bigger? Public speaking, mentoring?" Elijah smiled. "Don't need to be big. Just useful." Meanwhile, at Hardin and Rowe, Marcus stewed. His work remained solid, but his social footing was crumbling. Clients who once invited him to weekend golf outings now made excuses. His name came up less often at leadership dinners. The final straw came when a lucrative client, the Latham Development Group, abruptly shifted its business to another partner. When Marcus confronted the client's CEO, the man was blunt. "It's not your legal work, Marcus. It's, well, perception. You know how it is. Public image matters." That night, alone in his sleek, empty kitchen, Marcus poured himself a drink and stared at the glass. For the first time, real self-awareness flickered. He had taken Elijah for granted. Worse, he had disrespected the man who had shaped his life. Pride had blinded him. He thought back to the lean years, when Elijah had worked double shifts to pay for Marcus's schooling, when he had bought Marcus his first suit for law school interviews, when he had stood cheering at Marcus's law school graduation. And now? Now, Marcus was the one diminished. Not by failure of skill, but by failure of character. The next morning, driven by a restless mix of guilt and determination, Marcus called Charles at Jenkins and Wells. "I need to understand," Marcus said. "My father, how did he build all this?" Charles paused, then answered levelly. "Elijah Bennett worked harder than most. He saved when others spent. Invested wisely, patiently. Never chased status. He built something real." Marcus swallowed hard. "I need to see him. I need to make this right." Charles's voice softened. "Then go to him. But go humbly." That afternoon, Marcus drove to Brookhaven. The weight in his chest grew heavier with each passing mile. When he reached the estate's iron gate, he buzzed in. The voice that answered was calm. "Yes. It's me. Marcus. Dad, may I come in?" A pause. Then, "Come ahead." The gate swung open slowly. Marcus parked and approached the front door, his pulse quickened. Elijah opened it himself, standing tall, composed. Marcus swallowed his pride. "Dad! I owe you an apology. A real one." Elijah's gaze was steady. "I'm listening." Marcus drew a long breath. "I treated you with disrespect. I assumed you were small. I was wrong. You built everything, this life, this example. And I dismissed it. For that, I am deeply sorry." A silence stretched between them. Then Elijah gestured inside. "Come in. Let's talk." For the first time in months, father and son sat across from each other, not as adversaries, but as men facing hard truths. The road to redemption had begun. The great room of Elijah's estate was filled with late afternoon light. The wide windows framed the rolling green lawn, but Marcus barely noticed. He sat on a leather armchair, hands clasped between his knees, shoulders slightly hunched, an unfamiliar posture for the man who was usually so composed in boardrooms. Across from him, Elijah sat in his favorite chair, an open book resting on the table beside him. For a long moment, neither spoke. The only sound was the distant song of birds outside. Finally, Marcus broke the silence. "I don't even know where to begin." Elijah's voice was calm. "Try the truth." Marcus looked up, meeting his father's eyes. "I let my pride get in the way. I was caught up in status, appearances. The firm, the clients, the whole world I built, it twisted how I looked at things. At you." Elijah nodded slightly, saying nothing. "I told myself you had nothing. That I was the one who'd made it. But that wasn't true. You sacrificed so much for me. You worked long hours, paid for school, taught me discipline. Without you, I wouldn't be here." Elijah's gaze remained steady. "And yet, when I needed a place to lay my head, you pushed me out." Marcus's throat tightened. "I know. And I hate myself for it now. I was wrong. And I need to make that right, not just for appearances. For me. For us." Elijah let the words hang in the air, watching his son carefully. "It's good to hear. But an apology alone won't fix what's been done." Marcus nodded. "I understand. I don't expect you to just forget it. But if you'll allow me, I'd like to start again. To be a better son than I've been." Elijah leaned back slightly. "It's not about starting again, Marcus. It's about learning who you are. The city may know my name now, but that was never my aim. You're the one who has to decide what kind of man you'll be, when no one's watching." The words sank deep. Marcus had spent so many years building an image, crafting a persona that impressed others. But in this room, stripped of pretense, he saw how empty that pursuit had been. "I want to change," he said simply. Elijah studied him for a long moment. "Then start by listening. And by serving something bigger than yourself." The conversation turned then, toward practical things. Elijah spoke of his new work on the mayor's advisory council, of opportunities to create a lasting impact in the city's housing and trades. "You have influence, Marcus," Elijah said. "More than most. You could use it to open doors, for those who've never had a chance. But you have to want to." For the first time in years, Marcus wasn't thinking about billable hours or firm politics. He saw the possibility of something more, of redemption through action. "I'd like to help," Marcus said quietly. "If there's a way." Elijah nodded. "There's always a way. But it's earned." As the sun dipped below the horizon, the two men talked on, about the past, about missed chances, about the future. No great reconciliation happened in that single evening. But the first stone had been laid. Meanwhile, across Atlanta, the ripples of Elijah's influence continued to spread. At the mayor's office, staffers spoke with growing admiration of the man whose voice brought wisdom without ego. At community centers, young tradesmen now mentioned Elijah as a model of what could be achieved with patience and integrity. And at Hardin and Rowe, Marcus's shift had not gone unnoticed. His tone toward staff softened. He began taking an interest in pro bono projects, not for show, but because the work mattered. Even senior partner Rothman remarked quietly to another partner, "Perhaps Marcus Bennett is learning something after all." It wasn't easy. The path ahead would be long. But for Marcus, the seed of change had been planted. And for Elijah, there was satisfaction, not in wealth or status, but in knowing that perhaps, just perhaps, the son he had raised might yet live up to the values he'd always hoped to pass on. Weeks passed, and Atlanta's humid summer gave way to cooler days. Elijah continued his quiet work with the Advisory Council, advocating for affordable housing and better support for young tradesmen. Word of his thoughtful contributions spread steadily, drawing respect from politicians and community leaders alike. Marcus, for his part, followed through on his pledge. He showed up, at first cautiously, unsure how to navigate this new path. He attended community meetings with Elijah, introduced himself not as partner at Hardin and Rowe, but simply as Marcus Bennett, son of a builder. At first, many regarded him warily, aware of the story behind his fall from public favor. But as weeks turned into months, his consistent presence began to shift perception. He listened more than he spoke, volunteered for initiatives that offered no professional gain. Slowly, the sharp edges of his reputation softened. One crisp autumn morning, Elijah met Marcus for coffee at a small cafe near the city's West Side neighborhood. The two sat outside under a red umbrella, steam rising from their mugs. "I've been thinking," Marcus said. "The firm runs a summer intern program. It's always the same faces, privileged kids from big schools. But what if we partnered with the city's trade schools? Brought in young people who'd never get that foot in the door otherwise?" Elijah's eyes met his son's. "That's a good idea. If you're serious about it." "I am," Marcus said. "I want to help where it matters. Not just sign a check. Do the work." Elijah nodded slowly. "Then you'll need to get buy-in from your partners. And be ready for some resistance." "I'm ready," Marcus said firmly. In the weeks that followed, Marcus pushed the initiative at Hardin and Rowe. At first, his partners balked, citing liability concerns, image risk, the usual excuses. But Marcus persisted. He spoke not as the arrogant partner they'd known, but as a man changed by experience. "You all know my story," he said in a closed-door meeting. "You know I misjudged my father. I'm not here to posture. I'm here because this matters. This firm talks about leadership. Let's show it." Surprisingly, Rothman backed him. "Let's give it a try," the senior partner said. "One pilot group. But it has to be done right." Word of the program spread quickly. Trade schools across Atlanta responded enthusiastically. Meanwhile, Elijah kept moving forward. His voice on the advisory council grew stronger. He was asked to speak at a state-level housing conference. City leaders sought his counsel on new projects. One afternoon, after a council session, Mayor Carlton approached Elijah with a proposition. "You've built real trust in this room," the mayor said. "Atlanta needs voices like yours in leadership. I'd like you to consider a formal role, Deputy Director of Housing Initiatives. You'd have real influence." Elijah was quiet for a moment. "I'm not one for titles." "It's not about the title," the mayor replied. "It's about impact." Elijah nodded thoughtfully. "Let me think on it." Later that week, he shared the news with Marcus during one of their now regular dinners. "That's incredible," Marcus said. "You've earned it." Elijah's gaze was steady. "I didn't seek it. It came because of years of doing the work." Marcus absorbed the lesson. Not everything worth having came from pursuit. Sometimes it came from consistency, from integrity. At the firm, the first group of trade school interns arrived. Young men and women, many from underserved neighborhoods, stepped into the polished offices of Hardin and Rowe with wide eyes and nervous excitement. Marcus made a point to meet each one personally. He mentored them quietly, offering guidance without condescension. His colleagues began to notice the difference in him, not a sudden transformation, but a steady growth. Over time, the whispers about Marcus shifted. Where once there had been scorn, now there was curiosity, even respect. "You've changed, Bennett," Rothman said one day in passing. Marcus only replied, "Learning from the best." And he meant it. Because at every step of this new path, the example of Elijah Bennett stood as a guide, not in wealth, not in status, but in character. For Marcus, this was no short-term effort. He knew it would take years to fully earn back the respect he had squandered. But now, for the first time, he was walking the right road. And for Elijah, watching his son's slow but steady transformation brought quiet satisfaction. He had never needed an apology, never craved recognition. But to see Marcus become a better man, that was worth more than any fortune. Winter settled over Atlanta, and the city's skyline shimmered under pale, cool light. At the Brookhaven estate, Elijah spent mornings tending to his workshop, refinishing antique furniture, crafting small wooden pieces for charity auctions. The work kept his hands busy and his mind at peace. Word of his appointment as Deputy Director of Housing Initiatives soon became public. The announcement made the rounds in business journals and civic newsletters, veteran builder Elijah Bennett to help lead city housing reforms. The news pleased many and surprised few. His rise had been earned through action, not ambition. At Hardin and Rowe, Marcus's program with the trade school interns gained traction. Several interns impressed the partners with their work ethic and adaptability. The first successful placements into permanent roles followed, and the firm began promoting the initiative in its public relations efforts. Yet for Marcus, the greatest gains were personal, not professional. He found new purpose in the work, mentoring, opening doors for young people much like the boy Elijah had once taken in. He also mended relationships in quieter ways, calling old friends, reaching out to estranged colleagues. His humility was sincere, and slowly, trust returned. One afternoon, while reviewing intern progress reports, Marcus received a message from Charles Lanning. "Elijah invited you to attend the mayor's housing gala next month. Black tie. Important event. You should go." Marcus hesitated only briefly before replying, "I'll be there." The gala was held at the Georgia World Congress Center, a grand evening drawing business leaders, civic activists, and politicians. Elijah, as deputy director, would be honored for his contributions. The night of the gala, Marcus arrived in a sharp black tuxedo, but without his usual bravado. He found his assigned seat near the front, surrounded by familiar faces, some allies, some skeptics. Elijah, dressed simply but elegantly, commanded the stage when called. The mayor spoke of his service, his unwavering principles, his contributions to Atlanta's housing future. When Elijah stepped to the podium, his words, as always, were spare but profound. "I stand here not because I sought recognition," he said, voice deep and steady, "but because I believe every life we touch matters. In this city, too many have been overlooked. If my work can help change that, it will be enough." The applause was long and sincere. Across the room, Marcus felt a swell of pride, not in himself, but in his father. Later, during the mingling and handshakes, Marcus approached Elijah. They stood in a quiet corner away from the main crowd. "I'm proud of you, Dad," Marcus said simply. Elijah's expression softened. "That means something, coming from you." There was a pause, then Marcus added, "I've got more to learn. But, if you'll keep showing me, I'm ready." Elijah placed a firm hand on his son's shoulder. "Then we'll keep building. Together." The moment was small, but profound. A true bridge between them, rooted in respect, not obligation. As the evening drew to a close, Marcus noticed something else, the way people now approached Elijah, not just with admiration, but with genuine warmth. And how, when they greeted Marcus, it was no longer with polite distance, but with curiosity, even a touch of new respect. The road of redemption was long. But step by step, Marcus was walking it, and for the first time in years, with purpose beyond himself. And Elijah? He needed no spotlight. His greatest pride came not from honors, not from fortune, but from knowing that the values he'd lived by were finally taking root where they mattered most, in the heart of his son. Spring came early to Atlanta that year. The city's dogwoods and azaleas burst into bloom, and the air carried the scent of renewal. Life, it seemed, mirrored the season. Elijah rose before dawn as he always had, taking a slow walk through the grounds of his Brookhaven estate. Birds greeted the morning with song, and the crisp air felt good in his lungs. A small envelope waited in his mailbox that morning, formal letterhead from the mayor's office. Inside was confirmation of a new initiative, a city-funded scholarship for trade school students, named the Elijah Bennett Fellowship. Elijah smiled faintly. He hadn't asked for this honor. But the council had insisted, recognizing his years of service and quiet leadership. He tucked the letter away and moved on with his day, not one to dwell on praise. But news of the fellowship soon spread, through the trades community, local papers, and even across the polished halls of Hardin and Row. Marcus heard about it during a morning briefing. One of the associates remarked, "That's a real legacy, helping people start careers. Bennett's name's going to mean something for a long time." Marcus only nodded. He couldn't deny the truth of it. His father's legacy was deeper, richer than any courtroom victory or corporate deal. And Marcus, finally, was learning how to honor that. By late spring, the first group of trade interns had completed their term at the firm. Marcus hosted a small reception in the firm's atrium, a low-key event with few speeches, but meaningful all the same. As the interns mingled with partners and staff, Marcus stood quietly with Elijah, who had accepted his son's invitation to attend. "You did well here," Elijah said, surveying the room. Marcus exhaled. "I had a lot of help. And a lot to make up for." Elijah's gaze was steady. "Redemption's not about erasing the past. It's about doing right in the present. And you're doing that." Their eyes met, and in that moment, there was no need for more words. Later that evening, after most guests had departed, Marcus and Elijah walked together along Peachtree Street, the city alive with lights and energy. They paused at a small park bench. "I've been thinking about everything that's happened," Marcus said quietly. "About how easy it is to lose sight of what matters. I don't want to forget this lesson." Elijah nodded. "Then keep living it. That's how it sticks." A long pause followed. Finally, Marcus spoke again. "I've been talking to Rothman. Thinking about starting a foundation, something tied to the fellowship. Expand the program. I want your blessing on it." Elijah considered. "If it's done for the right reasons, not for show, I'll stand with you." "It is," Marcus said simply. "I want to build something that lasts. Like you always did." The words held weight. Elijah placed a hand on his son's shoulder, a rare gesture of warmth. "I'm proud of the man you're becoming," he said. And for Marcus, there was no accolade, no title, no deal that meant more. As father and son sat beneath the starlit sky, the city stretched before them, a city they both had shaped, in their own ways. The mistakes of the past could not be undone. But the future was theirs to build, together. And in that quiet moment, a legacy was not just restored. It was renewed, stronger, deeper, carried forward by the man who had once lost his way and by the father who had shown him how to find it again. Too often in today's world, we measure worth by status, titles, or wealth, forgetting the deeper value of character, sacrifice, and integrity. This story reminds us, the quiet strength of a good heart can build legacies no money can buy. Always honor those who've paved the way for you, you never know the full weight of their journey. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, it helps us reach more people with these important messages. And if you believe more people should hear stories like this, subscribe to this channel today. Together, let's spread awareness, compassion, and wisdom, one story at a time.